The United States celebrated this Independence Day amid nationwide protests, calls for systemic reform. Jonathan had alluded to this earlier. In a short film released for this weekend, 5 young descendants of the famed abolitionist Frederick Douglass read and responded to excerpts of his famous speech, "What to the Slave is the 4th of July." Now, Douglass delivered this speech on July 5th, 1852, to a group of abolitionists. Abolitionists are people who wanted to end slavery. In the speech, he asked all Americans to consider the country's long history of denying equal rights to black people. Let's watch a clip.
What to the American slave is your 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him, more than all other days in the year, the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is the constant victim.
Now, meanwhile, in Rochester, a statue of Frederick Douglass was desecrated and removed, perhaps as a retaliation for some of the Confederate monuments that were also desecrated and removed. Perpetrators remain unknown. Trump, he said, quote, "These anarchists have no bounds." I'm not sure if he was hopefully he was referring to the people who took down the Frederick Douglass statue and not the Confederate statues, but I'm not sure who he's referring to.
Right. I'm curious to, what are you gentlemen's thoughts on how people are reacting now, really realizing what some of these monumental structures, like people are really like protesting against monumental structures that have existed all these years, and now that we're becoming more aware and they don't necessarily fit the culture that we would want or are trying to create or make more awareness of moving forward. Like, what do you guys think? Like, I mean, how do you see it? Do you think it's part of the revolution?
It kind of reminds me, because it's a revolution. What monuments mean to me, and Yo-Yo, you can tell me otherwise, but what monuments mean to me are they're symbols of what you believe in your country and the pride of your country. And these are symbols that maybe in the past meant something different, but today, and maybe they didn't mean something different. Maybe people ignored it in the past. I don't know. But today they mean something very, very bad. They mean something that reminds people of a time in America that we don't want to remember. We don't want to honor people who owned slaves. We don't want to honor people who encouraged slavery. And these are people that we made monuments to, that we pass through every day. It kind of reminds me, in a way, when the Soviet Union fell. And maybe you guys are too young to remember this, because the Soviet Union fell in the late 1980s, early 1990s. All of Eastern Europe went from communism to some form of democracy. Now, obviously, Russia's basically an autocratic country, but many of the Eastern Bloc countries are democratic now. And as each country fell and there was protests to topple the communist regimes, the people who were protesting removed all the symbols of communism, including all the statues of Lenin, all the statues of the other communist leaders who came before, the present communist leaders who got overthrown, because they didn't want those symbols. They didn't want to remember those symbols. So, statues mean something. And certainly, I don't think anybody is saying that we should overthrow the United States of America. And, that's what Trump wants people to believe. Anarchists, he calls people anarchists. But certainly, we as a culture shouldn't be honoring those statues. And I think as our political groups are behind what the people are saying. So when our politicians, when we have meetings and politics and hearings about what should we be honoring, who should we be honoring, that's kind of behind what the people are saying in the street. And that's why you see statues toppling. Let me tell you a little bit about Frederick Douglass, because you read about him in high school and elementary school, and then, to be honest with you, I haven't heard his name in a long time, and now he's back in the news. He was a slave who escaped, and he is the first black man to run for vice president of the United States. He lost, but he was on a ticket. He was considered the best speech writer and best speech giver of the 1800s. It says here, taught others to read. He helped his wife escape from slavery. He took his name, by the way, Frederick Douglass took his name from a poem. He was deemed the 19th century's most photographed American. And he, like Yo-Yo, refused to celebrate Independence Day. He said he refused because there were many slaves that were still not emancipated during this time period. Now, Frederick Douglass recruited black soldiers for the Civil War. He served under 5 presidents in highly appointed federal positions, including U.S. Marshal, Minister, Resident, and Consul General to Haiti. And he was also, as I said, nominated for vice president on a major political ticket, but did not win.
And you would not have learned any of that in school except for reading it for yourself, just like Brad did, because they did not teach us all that in school.
You didn't learn about.
I had no idea that he was. I had no idea he was on a ballot.
I learned about. I remember learning about Frederick Douglass in school, but I don't remember learning about him ever since. Or hearing about him ever since.
Frederick Douglass was about 2 pages in our social studies book. Yeah.
Wow.
If that.
He was, by the way, considered at the time like the person to give a speech. He was the most riveting speech, and he taught himself how to read, and he educated himself by just reading high school textbooks at the time, because nobody actually taught him how to do it. So he must have been an extraordinarily smart man. Thanks for watching. For more Bradshaw Live, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel.